Good morning. I'm Rod Miles. I'm the pastor of Grace Church of Marin in Marin County, California. Marin is just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. Many of you have probably visited Sausalito or perhaps Muir Woods. If you have, you've been to Marin. Some of you have just driven through Marin on your way to Napa, but sometimes when we're out for a hike or amongst the beauty of this place, sometimes we say, it's so beautiful, I wish I lived here. And then we pinch ourselves and we say, I do. You might know that Marin is not only beautiful, but it's also very affluent and full of incredibly accomplished people. And yet, contentment is very elusive. On the outside, this place is ideal. But I've been a pastor here for 15 years, and I've seen the inside, and we're a broken people. We lack contentment, and it's one of many visible signs of our brokenness. Honestly, I like to draw a direct line between the fact that less than 2% of the people here worship on any kind of a worship on Sunday morning or over a weekend, and the lack of contentment. I think as we study Philippians 4, you could see that right away. There's also a sense in which I feel like the luckiest pastor alive. While we arguably have some of the best weather and most beautiful environment, we have creativity and intellectual capital galore, not to mention all these wonderful, accomplished people. We're also amongst the most angsty and lack of contentment people on the face of the earth. I like to say that we're lucky because we're sort of a walking caricature of the inadequacy of stuff and accomplishment to bring contentment. And so it should occur to us that it can't deliver. And yet we're a people that is sort of always in search of the missing piece or the next life hack or this adventure that will finally bring the contentment that we're after. But it always comes up short. And I feel like I'm fortunate because I get to be one to invite people to the one thing, to the one person that can never be inadequate and can truly bring contentment. I've been asked to share a story of something where I've seen God at work in the last few months as it relates to this COVID crisis that we're in. And I thought I'd just share a simple, beautiful story that happened last week. One of my dearest parishioners is an octogenarian who's been sort of beating herself up lately over her sense of her lack of faith in the midst of significant pain and physical discomfort. She's an Indonesian woman who has come to a deep and robust faith within the ministry of Grace Church of Marin over the past 10 years, and which is kind of awesome considering the fact that Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country in the world. But she struggles with pain and illness, and at the same time, she's a great prayer warrior for me in this church. So in God's providence, before the outbreak of the COVID crisis, we invited another local church, which was on the brink of collapsing, to come and have a sabbatical with us so they think about what's going to happen in the future and just come and worship with us. And their pastor is bivocational and he's wonderful. He's a gentleman and a great theologian. Turns out he's a PhD in the Psalms. And so I asked him if he would teach an evening virtual Bible study during this COVID crisis, and he was only too quick to say yes. Well, last week, truth be told, I was a little nervous because we were studying Psalm 88. And as you may know, Psalm 88 is one of the darkest psalms in all of the Psalter. But despite its darkness and the fact that it doesn't even mention God, something magnificent happened. Psalm 88 is still a deep expression of the psalmist's faith as he cries out in the midst of his pain and misery. Well, it turns out that this Indonesian octogenarian was tuned in. And after hearing this lecture, she confessed that she's been beating herself up for years over her so-called lack of faith because she's been crying out to God in pain. She had talked herself into thinking that the lover of her soul didn't want to hear about her struggles in the kind of detail that she felt she needed to express. But as she listened to the psalmist and she listened to Pastor Michael, she sensed a sense of great and deep relief that God wanted to hear her prayers, no matter how messy they were. They didn't need to be all dressed up. They could be honest and sincere, even if they felt dark at times. She knew that it was actually an expression of faith to simply cry out. And to see her face last Thursday night, the joy in her heart was really the highlight of my COVID-19 crisis season, if you will. And as it relates to this passage, I think she began to see that being content in every season doesn't preclude honesty. Further, I think she's seeing that to be in pain and troubled isn't an indictment about one's faith. It's just to the contrary. The whole point is that there can be contentment even within the pain. The secret, of course, is what Paul is sort of getting at here in this passage, is, of course, our union with Jesus. This was a very special moment for me and one that I treasure. I pray that God will awaken us all to the contentment to which He is inviting us into in vital union with Christ.